He grabs her hair and strangles her. A turn of event reveals the mastermind behind the elite SEALs. Harper Cole had been sitting in that corner booth for 2 hours and 17 minutes when the world decided to remind her why she'd stopped believing in quiet nights. She'd chosen the seat deliberately, back to the wall. Clear sight lines to both exits. Hands visible on the table, never underneath where they might be mistaken for a threat. These weren't conscious choices anymore. They were reflexes burned into her nervous system by 2 years of operating in places where the wrong posture could get you killed. The rusty anchor was exactly the kind of place she needed tonight. Loud enough to drown out her thoughts, anonymous enough that nobody would ask questions. The kind of establishment where people came to forget things, not remember them. She was nursing her second corona of the evening, making it last because she had nowhere else to be, and nothing waiting for her except an empty apartment and a bottle of Ambien she'd been trying not to take for 3 weeks straight. 4 tables away, a group of men had been getting progressively louder since she'd arrived. Private military contractors, she'd clocked them immediately. The tactical pants, the expensive watches, the way they talked too loud about operations they probably hadn't actually been on. 5 of them, all in their mid-30s, all radiating the particular kind of confidence that comes from being well paid and rarely challenged. One of them kept glancing her way. Harper ignored him. That was her first mistake. Not because she should have engaged, but because men like that interpret silence as invitation. His name was Travis Mercer, though she wouldn't learn that until later when the police were taking statements. 36 years old. Former Army Ranger with the 75th Regiment, 2 deployments to Afghanistan before transitioning to private security work that paid 6 figures and required half the accountability. He stood up. His buddies went quiet, watching with the anticipation of men who'd seen this show before and already knew how it ended. Travis walked over to Harper's booth with the loose-limbed swagger of someone who'd had exactly enough alcohol to feel invincible, and not quite enough to affect his coordination. He stopped at her table, looking down at her with an expression she'd seen 1,000 times before. "This booth's taken," he said. Harper didn't look up. She took a slow sip of her Corona, set it down carefully, and continued staring at the middle distance like he wasn't there. "Hey." Travis knocked on the table twice with his knuckles. "I'm talking to you, sweetheart. Me and my guys need this booth. You can go sit at the bar with the other girls." Harper finally raised her eyes, gray and flat and completely empty of the fear he was expecting to find there. "There are 4 empty booths on the other side of the room," she said. Her voice was quiet, controlled, almost pleasant. "Pick one." Travis's smile flickered, recalibrated. He wasn't used to resistance, especially not from someone who looked like she should be posting photos on Instagram instead of drinking alone in a dive bar. "Maybe I want this one." "Maybe you should learn to handle disappointment." One of Travis's buddies laughed. The wrong kind of laugh. The kind that challenged Travis's authority in front of his crew. Something shifted behind his eyes. "You got a mouth on you," he said, leaning closer. "Someone should teach you how to use it properly." Harper set down her beer with exaggerated precision. She met his gaze directly, and for just a moment something passed across her face. Not fear, not anger, something older and colder and infinitely more dangerous. "Walk away," she said. "I'm asking nicely. Once." Travis laughed. Actually laughed like she'd told him a joke he didn't quite understand but found amusing anyway. "Or what you gonna call your boyfriend, have him come defend your honor?" "I don't have a boyfriend." "No kidding. Wonder why?" "Walk. Away." Travis reached across the table and grabbed her Corona. Not to drink it. To dump it. A dominance display, primitive and predictable, and exactly what she'd expected him to do. The beer splashed across the table, running off the edge onto her jeans. Harper didn't move, didn't flinch. Just watched him with those gray eyes that seemed to be calculating something he couldn't quite see. "Oops," Travis said. "Clumsy me." His buddies were filming now. 3 phones pointed at the booth, capturing what they assumed would be a humiliating moment for the small blonde girl who didn't know her place. Harper stood up slowly. She was even smaller than she'd looked sitting down. The top of her head barely reached his chin. Her UCLA hoodie was 2 sizes too big, making her look like a teenager borrowing her older brother's clothes. "You got beer on my jeans," she said. "Yeah. What are you going to do about it?" Harper tilted her head slightly, studying him like he was a problem she was working through in her mind. "Nothing," she said. "Because you're going to apologize, pay for my drink, and walk back to your table. And we're going to pretend this never happened." Travis stared at her for a long moment. Then he started laughing again, louder this time, playing to his audience. "Holy shit! You hear this little sorority girl thinks she's gonna... I'm not asking again." The words cut through his laughter like a blade. There was something in her voice now, something that made the bartender look up from the glass he was polishing. Something that made one of Travis's friends lower his phone slightly, suddenly uncertain about what he was filming. Travis stopped laughing. For just a second, some primitive part of his brain tried to send him a warning, some ancient survival instinct that recognized a predator even when it was wrapped in a 125-pound package with freckles and a ponytail. He ignored it. "You know what?" he said, reaching for the empty Jack Daniels bottle on the adjacent table. "I think someone needs to teach you some manners." The bottle felt good in his hand. Heavy. Solid. A weapon that had won him plenty of arguments in plenty of bars over plenty of years. "Last chance?" Harper said. "Sweetheart, I'm just getting started." He swung. Not a half-hearted intimidation swing. A real one. Full force aimed at her temple, intended to hurt, intended to put her on the ground and remind her exactly where she stood in the natural order of things. Harper saw it coming. Saw his shoulder drop, saw the weight transfer, saw the trajectory that would intersect with her skull in approximately 0.3 seconds. She could have moved, could have deflected, could have done any of a dozen things that would have ended this cleanly and quietly. She didn't. She let him connect. The bottle exploded against the right side of her head with a sound that made everyone in the bar stop talking. Glass and whiskey sprayed across the booth. Blood bloomed immediately from a cut above her temple, running down her face in a warm red sheet. Harper's vision doubled, then tripled, then snapped back into focus with the clarity that only comes from extensive training in exactly how much punishment a human body can absorb and still function. She didn't fall. She didn't stagger. She stood there, blood running down her neck, soaking into the collar of her hoodie, and she smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Travis was still holding the broken bottleneck, staring at her like she was a magic trick he couldn't figure out. She should have been on the ground. She should have been crying. She should have been doing any of the things that women did when men hit them. She was standing there smiling at him with blood on her face, and for the first time in a very long time, Travis Mercer felt something cold crawl up his spine. "My turn," Harper said. She moved. Later, when people tried to describe what happened next, they would struggle for words. Fast wasn't accurate. Fast implied something you could track with your eyes if you paid attention. This was different. This was a woman standing still one moment and then simply being somewhere else the next, like the space between had been edited out of reality. Her left hand caught his wrist, the one holding the broken bottle. Her grip was precise, targeting the specific cluster of nerves and tendons that controlled fine motor function. Travis's fingers spasmed open involuntarily, the bottleneck clattering to the floor. What the? Her right elbow drove into his floating ribs, with surgical precision targeting the spot where bone was thinnest and organs were most vulnerable. The crack was audible across the entire bar. Travis's breath left him in a sound that was half gasp, half scream. He bent forward on instinct, trying to protect his damaged side. Harper helped him down. Her knee came up not to his groin like he might have expected, but to his solar plexus, exactly where his diaphragm was already spasming. The impact folded him in half, sent him to his knees, with his mouth opening and closing like a fish pulled out of water. 3 seconds. That's all it had taken. 3 seconds to transform Travis Mercer from apex predator to wounded prey. His buddies were frozen phones, still recording their brains, struggling to process what they were witnessing. Travis was on his hands and knees, blood dripping from his nose, where it had met the floor, fighting for breath that wouldn't come. He tried to push himself up, tried to salvage something from the wreckage of his pride. That's when Harper made a decision. Not in anger, not in rage. In cold, calculated judgment based on years of training and a very specific understanding of human anatomy. She stepped behind him while he was still struggling to rise. Her hand pressed against his back, feeling for landmarks finding the space between T12 and L1, with the precision of someone who had studied exactly where the human spine was most vulnerable. "Wait," Travis gasped. "Wait, Harper applied pressure. Not a strike. Something worse, a specific manipulation of vertebrae that she'd been taught in advanced CRE training, designed for situations where you needed to incapacitate someone completely without killing them. The sound Travis made wasn't a scream. It was something beyond screaming, a noise that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than his throat, somewhere primal and broken. His legs stopped working, just like that. One moment he was trying to stand, and the next he was collapsing face first onto the barroom floor with his lower body completely unresponsive. Harper stepped back. Travis was writhing on the ground, or trying to. His arms were moving, clawing at the floor, but everything below his waist had gone silent. He was making sounds now, desperate animal sounds, trying to understand why his legs wouldn't obey his commands. "My legs," he was saying over and over. My legs, I can't feel my legs." His 4 buddies finally unfroze. They stood up from their table chairs, scraping back faces, cycling through confusion and anger, and something that might have been fear. Harper turned to face them. She didn't raise her hands, didn't drop into a fighting stance, just stood there with blood still running down her face, and Travis screaming on the floor behind her, looking at them with an expression of perfect, absolute calm. "You have a choice," she said. Her voice was quiet, conversational, almost friendly. "You can sit back down and call 911 for your friend. Or you can try to be heroes." She paused. Let them look at Travis. Let them hear his screams. "Your call." They sat down. One of them was already dialing, hands shaking so badly he almost dropped his phone. Harper walked over to where Travis was lying, lowered herself into a crouch beside his head. He was crying now, tears mixing with blood and snot, still trying to move legs that wouldn't respond. She leaned close enough that only he could hear her over his own sobbing. "Some women don't serve coffee," she said. "They serve in places where men like you would cry for their mothers in the first 10 minutes. The only reason you're breathing right now is because I chose to let you breathe. Remember that. Every time you look at a woman for the rest of your life, remember that the small blonde girl at the bar showed you more mercy than you deserved." She stood up. The bartender, a retired Marine named Castellano, who had seen enough violence in his life to recognize its different flavors, was standing behind the bar with both hands flat on the counter, not reaching for the phone, not reaching for the shotgun he kept underneath, just watching. Harper met his eyes. Something passed between them. Recognition. Understanding. The silent acknowledgement of people who had both lived in worlds where this kind of thing was sometimes necessary. "You gonna call the MPs?" she asked. Castellano shook his head slowly. "Didn't see anything. Bar was empty. Must have slipped on a wet floor." Harper nodded. She pulled a 20 from her pocket, set it on the bar. "For the Corona." Then she walked out the back exit into the parking lot, leaving 31 witnesses, 8 phone videos, and 1 man who would never walk quite right again. She made it to her truck before her hands started shaking. Not from fear, not from adrenaline, from rage. Rage at Travis Mercer for being exactly what she'd expected him to be. Rage at the 31 people who'd watched him hit her with a bottle and done absolutely nothing. Rage at herself for being in that bar in the first place, for caring enough about his disrespect to prove a point, instead of just walking away like a professional. Rage at the Navy for benching her 4 months ago, and leaving her with nothing to do except sit in dive bars and wait for men like Travis to give her an excuse. Harper sat in her 2015 Tacoma under a broken streetlight and pressed her palms against her eyes until the shaking stopped. Blood was drying in her hair. The cut above her temple was still seeping, but it was shallow. Scalp wounds always bled worse than the damage warranted. She had a first aid kit in the glove box. She'd treated worse in worse conditions. As she cleaned the wound, her mind went somewhere else. Yemen. 18 months ago. A helicopter filling with blood while she worked on a man who was already dying. Senior Chief Nathan Vega. 31 years old. Princeton graduate who'd turned down a Wall Street career to serve his country. Spoke Arabic well enough to negotiate with tribal elders. Believed in the mission with a kind of idealism that would have gotten him killed in his first month if Harper hadn't been there to pull him back from stupid decisions. They'd been running a target interdiction operation near the Saudi border when everything went wrong. Intelligence was bad. Ambush was worse. Vega took an RPG fragment to the throat, severing his carotid and collapsing his trachea in the same instant. Harper had worked on him for 14 minutes. 14 minutes of her hands inside his neck trying to clamp an artery that wouldn't stop spurting, trying to keep his airway open while blood bubbled up faster than she could suction it. 14 minutes of watching him die by inches while the helicopter climbed toward international waters and the corpsman screamed at her to call it. "Just call it, he's gone." She kept him alive until they crossed the line. He died 30 seconds later, holding her hand, staring at her with eyes that knew exactly what was happening. His last words, "Tell my daughter I tried to come home." Harper had carried those words for 18 months. Carried them through a psych eval that cleared her for duty. Carried them through a debrief that praised her composure under fire. Carried them through a medal ceremony where she'd stood at attention and let them pin bronze and ribbon to her chest while Nathan's wife sobbed in the front row. She carried them still. Every day. Like a second skeleton underneath her skin. Her phone buzzed. A text from a number she recognized, but hadn't saved. Commander Diana Reyes, her commanding officer at Naval Special Warfare Command. 3 words, my office, 700. Someone had called it in. Harper stared at the message for a long moment. In less than 8 hours, she'd be sitting in another office explaining another altercation, answering the same questions she'd answered a dozen times before. Why couldn't she just walk away? Why did she keep making everything harder than it needed to be? Why was she such a goddamn problem? She pulled out her wallet, found the photograph tucked behind her license. Nathan Vega in Yemen, 3 days before the mission. Grinning at the camera covered in dust, looking like he'd just figured out the punchline to a joke no one else had heard yet. Harper touched the small trident tattooed behind her left ear. The mark that less than 200 people in military history had earned the right to wear. Nathan had believed the mission mattered, believed people were worth saving even when the math didn't add up, even when the smart move was to cut losses and extract. She wondered what he would think if he could see her now. Sitting in a parking lot with blood in her hair and another man's spine on her conscience, no closer to figuring out who she was supposed to be than she'd been the day he died. Her phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Commander Reyes. It was a Google alert she'd set up months ago and forgotten about. Navy SEAL girl breaks man's back in bar fight video goes viral. Harper clicked the link. The video already had 2.3 million views. She watched herself stand up from that booth, blood running down her face, and systematically dismantle a man twice her size in less than 5 seconds. The comments were already flooding in. Some calling her a hero. Some calling her a psychopath. Some demanding to know who she was, what unit she was with, whether the Navy was going to court-martial her or give her a medal. Harper closed her phone and started the truck. It didn't matter. None of it mattered. In 8 hours, she'd be sitting across from Commander Reyes, and whatever happened next would happen. She'd face it the same way she'd faced everything else since Kodiak, since Buds, since Yemen. Straight on, no matter what it cost her. Harper didn't sleep that night. She sat on the floor of her apartment with her back against the wall and Nathan Vega's dog tags in her hands, watching the view count on that video climb past 5 million, then 7, then 10. By 300, someone had identified her. Harper Cole, 24 Petty Officer, 1st Class Naval Special Warfare Command, one of youngest women to complete BUD-IS, 2 combat deployments, Bronze Star recipient. By 0400, her face was on every military news site in the country. By 0500, her phone had 247 missed calls from numbers she didn't recognize. She turned it off, showered, put on her dress uniform, and drove to base. Commander Diana Reyes was waiting for her. "Sit down, Petty Officer." Harper sat. Reyes was 53 years old, one of the first women to serve as a combat pilot in the Navy, 28 years of service, and a reputation for being absolutely unreadable. She had Harper's service file open on her desk, but she wasn't looking at it. She was looking at Harper. 12 million views, Reyes said. As of 6 minutes ago, 12 million people have watched you paralyze a civilian contractor in a bar fight. He hit me first, ma'am. I know. I've seen the footage. All 8 angles of it. Reyes leaned back in her chair. That's not why you're here. Harper waited. You're here because JAG wants to court-martial you. NCIS wants to investigate you. And the Secretary of the Navy called my personal cell phone at 0430 this morning to ask me what the hell is happening in my command. What did you tell him, ma'am? I told him I'd handle it. Reyes picked up a pen, turned it over in her fingers. The question is whether I can. Harper felt something cold settle in her stomach. Travis Mercer, Reyes continued, 36 years old, former Army Ranger 75th Regiment, currently employed by Black Ridge Security Solutions, which happens to hold a $3 billion contract with the Department of Defense. She paused. His lawyers filed assault charges at 0600. His company is threatening a civil suit that names you, me, and the entire Naval Special Warfare Command. He hit me with a bottle, ma'am. I have a laceration that required 7 stitches. And he has a T12 vertebral fracture that will require 18 months of physical therapy before he can walk unassisted. Reyes's voice was flat. Proportional response is going to be a hard argument to make. Harper said nothing. Tell me something, Cole. Reyes set down the pen. When you broke his spine, were you thinking about Travis Mercer? Or were you thinking about something else? The question hit harder than the bottle had. Harper's jaw tightened. Her hands, resting on her knees, curled into fists. Permission to speak freely, ma'am. Granted. I was thinking about every man who's ever looked at me and seen something small, something weak, something they could break because they were bigger and louder and nobody would stop them. Harper's voice was steady, but something underneath it was shaking. I was thinking about 14 minutes in a helicopter watching someone I loved die because I couldn't work fast enough. I was thinking about 4 months of sitting behind a desk while the Navy decides whether I'm an asset or a liability. And I was thinking that if I let that man walk away after what he did, I would never be able to look at myself again. Reyes studied her for a long moment. Nathan Vega, she said quietly. Harper flinched. I read your debrief from Yemen. I read the commendation report. I read the psychiatric evaluation that cleared you for duty. Reyes's voice softened just slightly. I also read between the lines. Ma'am, you loved him. It wasn't a question. Harper felt her throat close, felt 18 months of carefully constructed walls start to crack. He was my team leader, she said. He was more than that. Silence. Harper closed her eyes. When she opened them again, there were tears on her face that she hadn't felt coming. We never crossed any lines, she said. We never would have. He had a wife, a daughter. He believed in doing things right. Her voice broke. He believed in everything. Reyes nodded slowly. And when he died, part of you died with him. Harper couldn't answer. Couldn't find words for the thing that lived in her chest, the hollow space that had been growing larger every day since that helicopter crossed into international waters. That's why you hit Major Morrison in Somalia, Reyes said. Not because he gave a bad order, because he gave a bad order that reminded you of Yemen. That reminded you of what happens when leadership fails, and good people die for it. He knew, Harper whispered. Morrison knew that village was compromised. He sent us in anyway because he wanted the credit for the capture. 3 of my teammates almost died. And you broke his jaw. I'd do it again. Reyes stood up, walked to the window, stood there with her back to Harper for a long moment. Do you know why I requested you for my command, Cole? Harper blinked. Ma'am? After Yemen. After the Bronze Star. After every other command said you were too volatile, too emotional, too much of a risk. Reyes turned around. I requested you specifically. Do you know why? No, ma'am. Because I saw something in your file that reminded me of myself 30 years ago. Reyes walked back to her desk, but didn't sit down. A woman who was too good at her job for the system to know what to do with her. A woman who cared too much about the people under her command. A woman who kept getting told she was a problem when what she really was inconvenient. Harper stared at her. The Navy doesn't know what to do with women like us, Reyes continued. We break the mold. We make people uncomfortable. We remind them that their assumptions about strength and leadership and capability are wrong. She paused. And sometimes when we've been pushed too far, we do things that give them the excuse they've been looking for to get rid of us. Is that what this is? Harper asked. Are they going to discharge me? Reyes sat back down. That depends. On what? On whether you can prove you're still an asset. Reyes opened a drawer, pulled out a folder, slid it across the desk. I made some calls this morning, called in some favors, reminded some people of things they owe me. Harper picked up the folder. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a classified header. Sierra School, Reyes said. Advanced level. 5-day evaluation starting 72 hours from now. Harper looked up. This is the instructor certification course. This is for people the Navy wants to evaluate for special programs, for people who need to prove they can handle extreme stress without losing control. Reyes met her eyes. For people who need a second chance. And if I pass, JAG drops the charges. Black Ridge drops the lawsuit. Your record gets sealed and you get assigned to the new integrated SERE instructor program at Fort Bragg. Reyes paused. And you get to keep being a SEAL. Harper's heart was pounding. And if I fail? Medical separation. General discharge. Your career is over, and you spend the next 6 months fighting a civil suit that will take everything you have. Harper looked down at the paper in her hands, looked at the classified stamp, the authorization signatures, the start date that was less than 3 days away. This isn't really a choice, is it, ma'am? No, Reyes said. It's not. Harper nodded slowly. Then I'll pass. You'd better. Reyes stood extended her hand. Because I'm betting my career on you, Cole. Don't make me regret it. Harper shook her hand. I won't, ma'am. She turned to leave. Cole. Harper stopped at the door. That man in the bar. Mercer. Reyes's voice was quiet. Did he deserve what you did to him? Harper thought about the bottle exploding against her skull. Thought about 31 people watching and doing nothing. Thought about every woman who'd ever been hit by a man who thought size meant power. No, ma'am, she said. He deserved worse. She walked out. 3 days. 72 hours to prepare for the hardest evaluation of her life. Harper drove to the gym on base, the one that was never crowded at this hour, and spent 4 hours pushing her body until her muscles screamed and her mind went quiet. Then she went home, packed a bag, and pulled out the box she kept in the back of her closet. Nathan's things, not official things. Those had gone to his wife, to his daughter, to the Navy's administrative apparatus. These were the things nobody knew she had. A paperback book he'd been reading, dog-eared on page 247. A challenge coin from a mission in Syria. A handwritten note he'd passed her during a briefing that said, whoever scheduled this meeting for 0600 should be court-martialed. And a letter. Sealed. Addressed to her. Given to her by his wife at the funeral with shaking hands and eyes that held no accusation, only understanding. He wrote these for everyone on his team, Sarah Vega had said. In case something happened, he wanted you to have yours. Harper had never opened it. 18 months and she'd never been able to make herself read his last words to her. She held the envelope, now feeling the weight of it, the texture of the paper, the slight bulge where something other than a letter was tucked inside. Her hands were shaking. She put it back in the box. Not yet, not until she knew whether she was going to survive what came next. The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparation. Physical conditioning. Mental rehearsal. Review of SERE protocols and resistance techniques. She'd been through the basic course years ago during Bud S, but advanced level was something else entirely. Designed for operators going into denied areas. Designed to break people down to their core and see what was left. Harper knew what they'd find when they broke her. She just didn't know if it would be enough. On the morning of day 3, she drove to Fort Bragg. The SERE compound was exactly what she'd expected. Anonymous buildings, high fences, the kind of place designed to disappear from memory. A sergeant met her at the gate. Petty Officer Cole. Yes. Follow me. He led her through 2 checkpoints past 3 buildings to a room that contained nothing but a table, 2 chairs, and a man she'd never seen before. Colonel Marcus Shaw, 60 years old. Former SEAL who'd helped design the modern CRA curriculum. Gray hair, weathered face, eyes that looked like they'd seen everything the world had to offer and hadn't been impressed by any of it. Sit down, Cole. She sat. Shaw studied her for a long moment without speaking. It was a technique she recognized. Silence as pressure. Make the subject fill the void. She didn't. I've read your file, Shaw finally said. Impressive service record. Yemen, Somalia, Syria. He paused. Also read about the bar. Yes, sir. 12 million views now. Probably more by the time we're done here. Harper said nothing. You know what I see when I look at you, Cole? No, sir. I see a weapon that's been badly maintained. Shaw leaned forward. I see someone with extraordinary capability who's been grinding themselves down for 18 months because they don't know how to process what happened to them. I see a bomb that's been ticking for a long time, and that bar fight was just the first explosion. Harper's jaw tightened. Is that your professional assessment, sir? It's my observation. My assessment comes after the next 5 days. Shaw stood up. You'll be inserted tonight at 2200, 40 kilometers of evasion through terrain that wants to kill you. If they catch you, you go into resistance phase. If you break, you're done. If you quit, you're done. If you give me any reason to think you're a liability instead of an asset, you're done. I understand, sir. No. Shaw shook his head. You don't. Not yet. But you will. He walked to the door, stopped with his hand on the frame. One more thing, Cole. This evaluation isn't about whether you can survive pain. Any operator worth their salt can survive pain. He looked back at her. This is about whether you can fall apart and put yourself back together. Whether you can break and still be useful afterward. What's the difference, sir? Shaw smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. That's what you're going to find out. He left. Harper sat alone in that room for a long time, thinking about Nathan, about Yemen, about 14 minutes that had changed everything. She'd spent 18 months trying not to break. Now she was going to find out what happened when she finally did. At 2200 hours, they put a hood over her head and drove her into the forest. When the hood came off, she was alone. No map, no compass, no supplies. Just Harper Cole, the darkness, and 40 kilometers of hostile terrain between her and whatever came next. She started moving. The forest swallowed her whole. Harper moved through the darkness like water finding its path downhill. No wasted movement. No hesitation. Just the steady rhythm of footfalls on forest floor and the constant calculation of distance, direction, and threat. The temperature had dropped to 34 degrees. Light rain turned the ground slick and treacherous. Her clothes were soaked through within the first hour, body heat bleeding into the night air, faster than her metabolism could replace it. She didn't slow down. 18 kilometers by dawn. That was the target. Stay ahead of the pursuit teams, use terrain for concealment, trust the training that had been burned into her bones since Bud S. Her mind wanted to drift, wanted to go back to Yemen, to the helicopter, to Nathan's hand, going slack in hers. She wouldn't let it. Not now. Now there was only the next step, the next ridge, the next decision. Move, survive, prove them wrong. By 0400, she'd covered 15 kilometers. By 0600, she heard the dogs. Harper stopped, listened. 3 dogs, maybe 4, somewhere to the southeast. moving fast. The pursuit teams had found her trail. She changed direction, headed for a stream she'd crossed an hour earlier. Water would break the scent trail by her time. Maybe enough time. Maybe not. The stream was ice-cold, knee-deep, moving fast enough to knock her off balance if she wasn't careful. She waded upstream for 600 meters, then climbed out on a rocky outcrop that wouldn't hold footprints. The dogs got closer. Harper found a dense thicket, crawled inside, pulled debris over her body until she was invisible. Then she went still. Absolutely still. The way Nathan had taught her in Syria when they'd spent 11 hours hidden in a drainage ditch while enemy patrols walked past close enough to touch. Stillness isn't the absence of movement, he'd told her. It's the presence of control. Your body wants to shift, wants to scratch, wants to breathe deep. You don't let it. You become the ground. You become invisible. She became invisible. The dogs passed within 20 meters of her position. The handlers followed flashlights, cutting through the darkness, voices calling to each other in the clipped shorthand of professionals. Lost the trail at the stream. Split up, cover both banks. She's good. Better than the last 3. They moved on. Harper waited 30 minutes before she moved again. By noon on the second day, she'd covered 31 kilometers. 9 more to the extraction point. Her body was screaming for rest, for food, for warmth. She gave it none of those things. Rest was a luxury. Food was a memory. Warmth was something that happened to other people. She found a drainage culvert concrete pipe, half buried in a hillside, and crawled inside. 20 minutes. That's all she needed. 20 minutes of not moving, not thinking, not fighting. She closed her eyes. Nathan was there. He was always there waiting in the darkness behind her eyelids. You're doing good, Cole. I'm dying, Nate. No, you're just tired. There's a difference. I can't feel my feet. You don't need to feel them. You just need to use them. I miss you. I know. I miss you too. I couldn't save you. You kept me alive long enough to say goodbye. That was enough. It wasn't. It wasn't enough. Harper, wake up. Her eyes snapped open. Something was wrong. She could hear engines. Multiple vehicles converging on her position. The thrum of a helicopter somewhere overhead. Thermal imaging. They'd found her. Harper scrambled out of the culvert just as flashlights lit up the entrance. She ran, but they were everywhere. 6 men in tactical gear moving in coordinated formation, cutting off every escape route. She fought anyway. Took down 2 of them before the third hit her with a taser. Her muscles locked her body, betrayed her, and she went down hard on the forest floor. The last thing she saw before the hood went over her head was the gray light of dawn filtering through the trees. 47 hours. That's how long she'd evaded them. It wasn't enough. The resistance phase began immediately. They zip-tied her wrists, loaded her into a vehicle, drove for what felt like hours, but was probably 30 minutes. When the hood came off, she was in a concrete room with no windows and a single fluorescent light buzzing overhead. A man was sitting across from her. Sergeant First Class Brennan Ortiz. She didn't know his name yet, wouldn't learn it until later. All she knew was that he had the calm, patient eyes of someone who'd broken hundreds of people and had stopped counting long ago. Name, he said. Cole Harper, Petty Officer First Class. Service number. I didn't ask for your service number. I asked for your name. Cole Harper. Just Harper. That's what my mother called me. Your mother's dead. Harper flinched. Ortiz made a note on his clipboard. Kodiak, Alaska. 1998, fishing accident. You were 7. He looked up. Must have been hard. Growing up without a mother. I managed. Is that what you call this? He gestured at her zip-tied and soaked and shivering. Managing. Harper said nothing. Tell me about Nathan Vega. Her whole body went rigid. I don't know what you're talking about. Senior Chief Nathan Vega, your team leader in Yemen, died in your arms on a helicopter 18 months ago. Ortiz leaned forward. Tell me about him. I have nothing to say. Then we have nothing but time. They put her in a stress position, knees bent at 90 degrees, arms extended, holding a concrete block above her head. Simple physics. Gravity plus time equals agony. The instructors rotated every 30 minutes. Harper stayed in position for 4 hours. When her arms finally gave out, they reset her and started the count over. Tell me about Vega. Go to hell. Already there? You're the guest of honor? The concrete block went back up. They controlled the environment. Temperature swinging from freezing to sweltering and back again. Strobe lights at random intervals. Recordings of explosions, screaming voices shouting in Arabic and Pashto. Sleep deprivation measured in minutes, not hours. Harper went somewhere else. Back to Kodiak. Her father's boat cutting through gray water. The smell of salt and diesel and fish guts. Fear is just information, William Cole had told her when she was 9 years old. Use it, or it uses you. She used it. 48 hours into resistance phase, they changed tactics. Ortiz sat down across from her again. Same room, same buzzing light. But something in his expression had shifted. You're impressive, he said. I've seen operators with twice your experience break faster than this. Harper didn't respond. Her throat was too dry for words. But everyone breaks eventually. That's not weakness. That's biology. He slid a cup of water across the table. Drink. She stared at it. It's not drugged. It's not a trick. You're dehydrated, and if you collapse, this evaluation ends with you in medical and a failure on your record. Harper reached for the cup. Her hands were shaking so badly she almost spilled it. The water was the best thing she'd ever tasted. Tell me why you're really here, Ortiz said. Commander Reyes? I know what Reyes told you. I'm asking why you're really here. What are you trying to prove? Harper set down the cup. I'm not trying to prove anything. Then why didn't you quit 48 hours of this, and you haven't even asked to stop? Most people ask within the first 12. Ortiz studied her. What's keeping you going? Harper closed her eyes. Nathan's face swam up from the darkness, grinning in that photograph, bleeding in that helicopter, staring at her with eyes that knew he was dying. Someone I couldn't save, she whispered. Vega, she nodded. Tell me about him. And something in Harper, something that had been holding together by pure will for 18 months, finally cracked. We were running target interdiction near the Saudi border. Intel said the village was clean. Intel was wrong. The words came slowly at first, then faster, like water through a breaking dam. RPG came out of nowhere, took out the lead vehicle. Nathan caught a fragment in the throat. You tried to save him. I did everything right. 14 minutes. I kept his airway open, kept pressure on the artery, kept him conscious. Tears were running down her face now, but she couldn't feel them. We crossed into international waters, and I thought if I could just keep him alive a little longer, if I could just... He died. 30 seconds after we crossed. 30 seconds. Harper's voice broke. He was holding my hand, and he looked at me, and he said to tell his daughter he tried to come home. Ortiz was quiet for a long moment. And you've been carrying that ever since. Every day, every goddamn day. Harper looked up at him with red-rimmed eyes. I couldn't save him. I did everything right, and I couldn't save him. And I don't know. I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know if I'm worth saving myself. Is that what you were doing in that bar, trying to prove you were worth saving? I was trying to prove I still exist, that I'm not just a ghost walking around in a body that should have died in that helicopter with him. Ortiz stood up. He left the room without a word. Harper sat alone with her tears and her confession, and the weight of 18 months pressing down on her chest like a stone. She didn't know how long she waited. Minutes. Hours. Time had lost all meaning in this place. When the door opened again, it wasn't Ortiz. It was Colonel Marcus Shaw. He stood there for a moment looking at her. Then he walked over, produced a knife, and cut her zip ties. Stand up, Cole. Harper stood. Her legs almost gave out, but she caught herself on the table. Shaw handed her a bottle of water and a protein bar. Eat, drink, then listen. She ate. She drank. She listened. 4 days, Shaw said. You lasted 4 days under conditions designed to break people in two. You didn't quit. You didn't fabricate information. You didn't compromise your integrity. He paused. And when you finally broke, you told the truth. Is that supposed to be a compliment? It's supposed to be an observation, the kind that matters. Shaw sat down across from her. Do you know why I designed this evaluation the way I did? To torture people, to find people worth teaching. Shaw leaned forward. The operators who make it through this program, the ones who become instructors, they're not the ones who never break. Those people are dangerous. They don't understand limits, don't understand humanity, don't understand that the people they're training are capable of falling apart. I fell apart. You fell apart and you're still sitting here. That's the point. Shaw pulled a folder from his jacket, set it on the table. Do you know who you are, Cole? I mean, really know. Harper shook her head. Petty Officer First Class Harper Cole, one of 3 women in history to graduate BUDS, 2 combat deployments, Bronze Star with valor for actions in Yemen that saved 4 lives at the cost of nearly losing your own. Shaw opened the folder. Advanced CRA Certification Level 3, which means you've been trained for deep cover operations in denied areas. Classified service record that includes things even I'm not cleared to read. Harper stared at him. That tattoo behind your ear? The trident. Do you know how many people have earned that specific variant? No, sir. 23. In the entire history of the program. And Shaw closed the folder. You're not a problem to be managed, Cole. You're an asset to be utilized. The Navy just doesn't know how to do it yet. What are you saying? I'm saying we're building something new. An integrated SEER instructor cadre to train the next generation of operators. Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, men and women, people who need to learn not just how to survive, but how to come back from the edge. Harper felt her heart start to pound. We need people who understand what it means to break, who've been to that place and found their way back. Shaw met her eyes. We need people like you. You're offering me a job. I'm offering you a purpose. Shaw stood up. Different mission than you're used to. You won't be the one going into harm's way. You'll be the one preparing others for it, teaching them how to survive what you survived, how to carry what you carry. Harper thought about Nathan, about his belief that every mission mattered, that people were worth saving even when the math didn't add up. What about Jag? She asked. The charges, the lawsuit. Commander Reyes made some calls. I made some others. Shaw allowed himself a small smile. Travis Mercer dropped his complaint this morning. Turns out the full security footage from that bar made it very clear who started what. His company decided a lawsuit wasn't worth the publicity. So I'm clear. You're clear. If you want to be. Shaw extended his hand. The question is whether you want this. Whether you're ready to stop punishing yourself for something that wasn't your fault and start using what you learned to help others. Harper looked at his hand. She thought about 4 days of hell, about 18 months of guilt, about a letter in a box that she'd never been able to open. She thought about Nathan's voice in her head telling her to wake up, telling her she was doing good. She took Shaw's hand. When do I start? 30 days. Report to the Sear compound at Fort Bragg. We'll process your transfer orders this week. Shaw's grip was firm. And Cole, sir, that man in the bar, the one whose spine you broke. Shaw released her hand. He's going to walk again. 18 months of physical therapy, but he'll walk. I thought you should know. Harper nodded slowly. I didn't want to kill him. I know. That's why you're standing here instead of in a cell. Shaw walked to the door, stopped with his hand on the frame. The hardest part of what we do isn't learning how to hurt people. It's learning when to stop. You stopped. That matters. He left. Harper stood alone in that concrete room, processing everything that had just happened. 4 days ago, she'd been a problem to be solved. Now she was something else. She didn't know what yet, didn't know if she was ready to become whoever Shaw needed her to be. But for the first time in 18 months, she felt something other than grief and anger and the constant weight of Nathan's death. She felt possibility. It wasn't hope. Not yet. Hope was something she'd have to earn back slowly, one day at a time. But it was a start. Harper walked out of the Sear compound, on her own 2 feet into morning sunlight that felt like a second chance. In her pocket, her phone showed 37 missed calls and a text from Commander Reyes. Heard you passed. Proud of you. Now get some rest. Harper didn't text back. She drove to her apartment, walked to the closet, and pulled out the box she'd avoided for 18 months. Nathan's letter was still there. Sealed. Waiting. Her hands didn't shake this time when she picked it up. She opened it. Inside was a single page handwritten in Nathan's careful script, and something small and metal that fell into her palm. His seal trident pin. The letter read, Harper, if you're reading this, I didn't make it home. I'm sorry. I wanted to be there to see who you become. I wanted to watch you lead your own team someday, to see you earn everything you deserve. But life doesn't always give us what we want. It gives us what we can handle. I know you're going to blame yourself. I know you're going to carry this like a weight you'll never put down. That's who you are. That's what makes you the best operator I've ever served with. But here's the thing, Cole. The thing I need you to understand. You didn't fail me. You never failed me. Not once. The 14 minutes you fought for me in that helicopter, those were a gift. You gave me time to say goodbye. You gave me time to make peace. You gave me time to think about my daughter and know that people like you would be watching over her world. That wasn't failure. That was love. So here's my last order, petty officer. Stop surviving and start living. Take the guilt and the grief and the weight of me and turn it into something that matters. Teach. Lead. Show the next generation what it looks like to care that much about the people beside you. That's how you honor me. Not by dying slowly from the inside out. By living fully, completely with everything you have. I believe in you. I always have. Now go prove me right. Nathan. Harper sat on her bedroom floor with his trident in one hand and his words in the other, and she cried. Not the broken sobbing of the interrogation room. Something different. Something that felt like release instead of collapse. She cried for Nathan, for herself, for the 18 months she'd spent in prison without walls, and when she was done, she stood up. She pinned Nathan's trident next to her own above her heart. Then she started packing. 6 weeks passed like water through her fingers. Harper spent the first 2 weeks in transition, clearing out her apartment in San Diego, filing transfer paperwork, undergoing 3 more psychological evaluations that all came back with the same verdict: fit for duty, recommended for instructor assignment. The 3rd week, she drove to Fort Bragg. The Sear compound was exactly as she remembered it. Anonymous buildings behind high fences. The kind of place designed to forge people or break them depending on what they were made of. Sergeant First Class Brennan Ortiz met her at the gate. "Cole." "Ortiz." He shook her hand, his grip firm and professional. "Didn't expect to see you back so soon." "Didn't expect to be back. How do you feel?" Harper considered the question. Really considered it, because Ortiz wasn't asking to be polite. He was asking because he'd seen her fall apart in that interrogation room, seen her at her absolute lowest, and he needed to know if she'd actually rebuilt herself or just taped over the cracks. "I feel like I'm supposed to be here," she said. "I don't know if that's the right answer." "It's an honest one. That's better." He led her through the compound to a small office that would be hers. A desk, a chair, a filing cabinet, a window overlooking the training yard. Nothing personal. Nothing comfortable. "You start orientation tomorrow, 3 weeks of instructor certification, then you take your first class." Ortiz paused at the door. "Shaw wanted me to tell you something." "What?" He said the hardest part isn't teaching people how to survive. It's teaching them why they should want to. Ortiz met her eyes. "He said you'd understand what that means." Harper nodded slowly. She understood. The next 3 weeks were brutal in a different way than the evaluation had been. Not physically brutal, though the conditioning requirements were demanding. Intellectually brutal. Emotionally brutal. Learning how to break people down without destroying them. Learning how to rebuild what you'd broken. Learning how to look at a student who was crying and shaking and begging to quit and somehow find the words that would make them keep going. Harper threw herself into the work with the same intensity she'd brought to every mission. She studied the curriculum until she could recite it in her sleep. She observed senior instructors running sessions. She practiced techniques on volunteers until her execution was flawless. And every night she went back to her quarters and read Nathan's letter again. Stop surviving and start living. She was trying. The morning of her first class, Harper stood in front of the mirror in her quarters and looked at herself. 24 years old, 5 feet 4 inches, blonde hair pulled back in a regulation ponytail, 2 tridents pinned above her heart, Nathan's and her own. She looked like someone's daughter, someone's sister, someone who should be planning spring break instead of teaching special operators how to survive torture. That was the point. She walked to the training facility. 28 students were waiting for her. Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines. 19 men, 9 women. All of them looking at her with expressions she recognized. Polite skepticism. Professional courtesy. The unspoken question. Who is this girl, and what could she possibly teach us? Harper let them look. "My name is Petty Officer First Class Harper Cole," she said. "For the next 3 weeks, I'll be your primary instructor for the resistance training portion of this course." A hand went up immediately. Staff Sergeant Derek Rawlings, Army Special Forces, 32 years old. 3 combat deployments. Yes, Sergeant. Ma'am, no disrespect, but how old are you? 24. And a ripple went through the group. Exchanged glances. Raised eyebrows. And you've been through SEER yourself. I've been through SEER, Sergeant. I've also been through BUDI's 2 combat deployments and an advanced interrogation resistance program that makes this course look like summer camp. Rawlings didn't back down. Anyone can claim credentials, ma'am. I'm asking what qualifies you to teach us. Harper felt something shift inside her. Not anger, something colder. Something that remembered Travis Mercer's grin right before the bottle hit her skull. She walked toward Rawlings, stopped 2 feet away from him. Stand up, Sergeant. He stood. He was 6'1", probably 200 pounds, the kind of operator who'd never had to prove himself to anyone smaller than him. Hit me, Harper said. The room went silent. Ma'am, I said hit me. You want to know what qualifies me to teach you? Show me what you've got, and I'll show you what I've learned. Rawlings looked at Colonel Shaw, who was observing from the back of the room. Shaw nodded once. Rawlings turned back to Harper. Ma'am, I'm not going to... Harper moved. Her hand caught his wrist before he could react, twisted it into a lock that dropped him to his knees with a grunt of surprise. She shifted her weight, applied pressure to the specific nerve cluster that would make his entire arm go numb, and leaned close. In 3 seconds, I'm going to let go. When I do, you can try to hit me, or you can sit back down and listen to what I have to teach you. She released him. Your choice. Rawlings stood slowly, rubbing his wrist. He sat down. Anyone else have questions about my qualifications? Silence. Good. Harper walked back to the front of the room. Let me tell you what this course is really about. It's not about learning how to handle pain. Any operator worth their salt can handle pain. It's not about memorizing resistance techniques or practicing cover stories. She paused. Let the silence build. This course is about understanding what happens when everything you think you know about yourself gets stripped away. When you're cold and hungry and exhausted and scared and someone is using every psychological tool in their arsenal to make you break. Harper touched the tridents on her chest. I've been there. Not in training. In the real world where the people asking questions don't follow any rules, and there's no safe word that makes it stop. Her voice dropped. I've held people while they died. I've made decisions that will haunt me for the rest of my life. I've been broken down so completely that I didn't know if I'd ever find my way back. She looked at them, really looked, making eye contact with each one. But I did find my way back. And that's what I'm going to teach you. Not how to avoid breaking. That's impossible. You will break. Everyone breaks. Everyone. I'm going to teach you how to break and still come back. How to fall apart and put yourself together again. How to survive the worst day of your life and still be someone worth being afterward. Rawlings raised his hand again. Yes, Sergeant. How do you do it? How do you come back from something like that? Harper thought about Nathan, about his letter, about the 18 months she'd spent dying by inches before she finally learned how to live again. You find something worth coming back for, she said. Something bigger than your pain. Something that matters more than what they did to you. She paused. And you hold on to it with everything you have, even when your hands are shaking, and your mind is screaming, and every part of you wants to let go. What do you hold on to? Harper smiled. It was the first real smile she'd allowed herself in weeks. A promise, she said. Someone I loved told me to stop surviving and start living. I'm still learning how to do that, but I'm learning, and if I can learn, so can you. The class ran for 4 hours that first day. By the end of it, Harper was exhausted in a way she hadn't been since Yemen. Not physically exhausted, emotionally exhausted. Every word she'd spoken had cost her something, had required her to open wounds she'd spent 18 months trying to close. But something had shifted in the room. The skepticism was gone. The polite professional distance was gone. The students were looking at her differently now, seeing something they hadn't seen before. Seeing her. After the last student filed out, Colonel Shaw approached. "Not bad, Cole. Felt like I was bleeding the whole time. That's how you know it was real." Shaw handed her a cup of coffee. "The best instructors teach from their scars, not their textbooks. You've got plenty of scars to work with." Harper took the coffee, let its warmth seep into her hands. "Rawlings is going to be a problem," she said. "Rawlings is going to be your best student." Shaw smiled at her surprise. "He's the kind of operator who needs to be beaten before he can learn. You beat him. Now he'll listen. He's twice my size. Size doesn't matter when you know where to apply pressure. You know that better than anyone." Harper thought about Travis Mercer lying on the barroom floor with legs that wouldn't work. "Yeah," she said. "I guess I do." The weeks that followed were the hardest of Harper's career. Not because of the physical demands, not because of the institutional bureaucracy, because every day she had to stand in front of people and teach them things she was still learning herself. How to survive without losing yourself, how to break without shattering, how to carry the weight of what you've done and still move forward. She taught them through lectures and demonstrations, through controlled stress inoculation exercises that pushed them to their limits, through long conversations in the aftermath when they were shaking and crying and questioning everything they thought they knew. And somewhere along the way she started to heal. Not completely. The wounds were too deep for that. Nathan was still there every morning when she woke up, and every night when she closed her eyes. The guilt was still there, the persistent whisper that she should have been faster, better, more capable. But the weight was different now. Lighter. Shared. Every student she taught carried a piece of it for her. Every person she helped put back together took some of the burden off her shoulders. That's what Nathan had meant, she realized. That's what his letter had been trying to tell her. The way you honor the dead isn't by dying with them. It's by living for them. It's by taking everything they taught you and passing it on generation after generation until their sacrifice becomes something permanent, something that matters. 3 months into her assignment, something unexpected happened. Harper was in her office reviewing evaluation reports when there was a knock at the door. "Come in." The door opened. A woman stood there. Mid-30s dark hair streaked with gray, tired eyes that had seen too much. She was wearing civilian clothes, but there was something about the way she carried herself that marked her as military adjacent. "Can I help you?" Harper asked. "Petty Officer Cole? That's me." The woman stepped inside, closed the door behind her. "My name is Sarah Vega." Harper's world stopped spinning. "I'm Nathan's wife." Harper couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything except stare at this woman who had every right to hate her, who had every right to blame her for coming home when her husband didn't. "Mrs. Vega, Please, Sarah." The woman sat down across from Harper's desk without being invited. "I've been trying to find you for months. After the video went viral, after everything that happened, I started making calls, asking questions." She paused. "I needed to see you." "Why?" "Because my daughter asked about you." Harper felt her heart crack. "Emma is 8 now, old enough to understand that her father isn't coming back, but not old enough to understand why." Sarah's voice was steady, but Harper could see the effort it cost her. "She asked me who the woman was, the one who tried to save Daddy. I didn't save him. You kept him alive long enough to say goodbye." Sarah reached across the desk, took Harper's hand. That matters. That matters more than you know. Harper was crying. She hadn't realized she'd started, but tears were running down her face, dripping onto her uniform. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. I did everything I could, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't— Stop!" The word cut through Harper's spiral like a blade. Sarah squeezed her hand. "I didn't come here to hear you apologize. I came here to say thank you." She paused. "Nathan wrote me a letter too. The same kind he wrote you. He told me about you, Harper. He told me you were the best operator he'd ever served with. He told me that if anything happened to him, I should find you and tell you it wasn't your fault. He said a lot of things. Most of them I'm still trying to process." Sarah released her hand, pulled a photograph from her purse. "But this is why I'm really here." She slid the photograph across the desk. A little girl with Nathan's eyes and her mother's smile, holding a hand-drawn picture of a woman in a military uniform. "Emma drew this after I told her about you. She called it, 'The Angel Who Held Daddy's Hand.'" Harper couldn't look at it, couldn't look away. "She wants to meet you," Sarah said. "When she's older, when she can understand more. She wants to meet the woman who gave her father time to say goodbye. I don't know if I can do that." "You don't have to decide now." Sarah stood up. "I just wanted you to know that you're not the only one carrying him. You're not the only one who loved him." She paused at the door. "And you're not the only one who's learning how to live without him." Harper looked up. "How do you do it, every day? How do you keep going?" Sarah smiled. It was sad and beautiful, and somehow hopeful all at once. "I remember what he taught me, the same thing I'm guessing he taught you." She opened the door. "Fear is just information. Grief is just information. Use it, or it uses you." She left. Harper sat alone in her office for a long time, staring at the photograph of a little girl she'd never met who thought she was an angel. She thought about Nathan, about his letter, about the promise she'd made. Stop surviving. Start living. She was trying. Every day she was trying. And maybe that was enough. Maybe trying was all any of them could do. Maybe the whole point of being human was to keep trying, even when it hurt, even when it seemed impossible, even when the weight of everything you'd lost threatened to crush you. Harper picked up the photograph, looked at Emma's hand-drawn angel. She smiled. Then she put it in the drawer with Nathan's letter and his trident pin and all the other pieces of him she was still learning how to carry. Tomorrow she would teach another class. Tomorrow she would help another group of operators learn how to survive the worst moments of their lives. Tomorrow she would honor Nathan's memory the only way she knew how. By passing on what he'd taught her. By living fully completely with everything she had. By proving him right. 1 year changed everything. Harper had trained 6 classes by the time autumn came back around. Over 160 operators had passed through her instruction, and every single one of them had walked out different than they'd walked in. Not broken. Rebuilt. Not weaker. Stronger in the places they'd cracked. She'd found her rhythm. Found the balance between pushing students to their limits and knowing when to pull them back. Found the words that worked when nothing else did, the ones that reached through the fog of exhaustion and fear and planted something that would grow into resilience. Nathan would have been proud. She told herself that every morning when she pinned his trident next to hers. She told herself that every night when she read his letter before sleep. She told herself that every time a student broke down in front of her and she helped them find their way back. She was almost starting to believe it. The morning of October 15th started like any other. Harper was in her office at 05:30, reviewing files for the incoming class. 12 students this time. 6 Army, 4 Navy, 2 Air Force. Mixed backgrounds, mixed experience levels, mixed reasons for being here. One name stopped her cold. Private First Class Emma Rawlings, Army, 22 years old, recently completed airborne school, volunteered for the Advanced CRE program despite being told she was too junior, too inexperienced, too small. Harper stared at the name. Emma. The same name as Nathan's daughter. She shook off the coincidence, kept reading. But something about the file nagged at her. Something familiar in the background, the trajectory, the stubborn refusal to accept limitations. At 0600, the new class assembled. Harper walked in and scanned their faces the way she always did. Looking for the ones who thought they knew everything. Looking for the ones who were already scared. Looking for the ones who might not make it, and the ones who might surprise everyone. Her eyes found Emma Rawlings, 22 years old, 5 feet 2 inches, 98 pounds soaking wet, brown hair pulled back in a regulation bun, brown eyes that held something Harper recognized. Hunger, the desperate need to prove something to someone, maybe herself, maybe the world. Harper knew that look. She'd seen it in her own mirror for years. "Good morning," Harper said. "My name is Petty Officer First Class Harper Cole. For the next 3 weeks, you belong to me." She ran through the standard introduction, the expectations, the rules, the warning that this course would push them harder than anything they'd experienced before. Then she opened the floor for questions. Emma's hand went up immediately. "Yes, Private Rawlings. Ma'am, are you the one from the video?" The room went quiet. Harper had known this would come up eventually. The video had never gone away, not completely. 23 million views now. People still recognized her, occasionally, still asked questions, still wanted to know about the night she'd broken a man's spine in a bar outside Camp Pendleton. "I am," Harper said. "Is it true what they say, that you're one of the youngest women to ever complete BODES?" "It's true. And you've been in real combat, not just training, but actually Private Rawlings." Harper's voice cut through the questions like a knife. "This course isn't about me. It's about you, about what you're capable of and what you're going to learn. My background is irrelevant." "With respect, ma'am, it's not irrelevant to me." Harper studied the young woman, saw the defiance in her jaw, the challenge in her eyes, the desperate need to be taken seriously by someone who'd walked the path she wanted to walk. "Why are you here, Rawlings?" "To learn, ma'am." "That's the official answer. I'm asking for the real one." Emma hesitated. For just a moment, the mask slipped, and Harper saw something underneath. Something wounded. Something angry. Something familiar. "Because everyone told me I couldn't be," Emma said. "My whole life people have looked at me and seen someone small, someone weak, someone who should stay in her lane and let the big men handle the dangerous stuff." Her voice hardened. "I'm here to prove them wrong." Harper felt something shift in her chest. "Stay after class, Rawlings. We need to talk." The session ran for 4 hours. Standard first-day material, introductions to resistance theory, overview of interrogation techniques, psychological preparation for what was coming. Harper pushed them hard, but not too hard. The first day was about establishing baseline, not breaking anyone. When the others filed out, Emma remained. Harper waited until the room was empty, then sat down across from the young private. "Tell me about your father," she said. Emma's face went pale. Ma'am, your file says you were raised by a single mother in Fort Worth. Father listed as deceased military service, no other details. Harper leaned forward. Tell me about him. I don't see how that's relevant to everything is relevant in this course. Everything about who you are, where you came from, what drives you. If I'm going to train you, I need to know what I'm working with. Emma was silent for a long moment. He was Special Forces, she finally said. Green Beret, deployed when I was 3, came home when I was 7. She paused. Except he didn't really come home. Not all of him. PTSD. They didn't call it that back then. They called it adjustment issues. They said he just needed time. Emma's voice went flat. He took his own life when I was 9, left a note that said he was sorry but he couldn't carry it anymore. Harper felt her heart crack. I'm sorry. Don't be. It was a long time ago. Emma looked up and her eyes were dry. Hard. But that's why I'm here, ma'am. Because my father broke and nobody taught him how to put himself back together. Because somewhere in the system, someone failed him, and I want to make sure that doesn't happen to anyone else. Harper thought about Nathan. About his letter. About the promise she'd made. What do you want to do after this course? I want to be an instructor, like you. Emma's chin lifted. I want to teach people how to survive the things that killed my father. Harper stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the training yard where she'd rebuilt herself one day at a time. Being an instructor isn't about surviving, she said. It's about bleeding. Every class you open yourself up. You share the worst parts of yourself so your students can learn from them. You relive your trauma over and over again because that's what makes the teaching real. I know. No, you don't. Not yet. Harper turned around. But if you make it through this course, if you prove you can break and come back, I'll recommend you for the instructor program myself. Emma's eyes widened. You'd do that? I'd do it because I see something in you that I saw in myself at your age. Something angry and hungry and desperate to matter. Harper walked over, looked down at the young woman. But I need you to understand something first. What? The anger isn't enough. The hunger isn't enough. The need to prove people wrong will only carry you so far. Harper touched the tridents on her chest. At some point you have to find something else. Something bigger than your pain. Something worth living for, not just fighting for. What did you find? Harper thought about the question. Really thought about it. I found a promise, she said. Someone I loved told me to stop surviving and start living. Told me to take everything I'd learned and pass it on. She paused. That's what I'm doing here. That's what gets me up every morning. Not proving people wrong. Not fighting old battles. Building something that will last after I'm gone. Emma nodded slowly. I want that, she said. I want to build something that lasts. Then earn it. Harper extended her hand. Starting tomorrow, 0500. Don't be late. Emma shook her hand. Her grip was stronger than Harper expected. The next 3 weeks were brutal. Harper pushed Emma harder than any other student. Not because she wanted to break her, but because she recognized what Emma was capable of and refused to let her settle for less. The other instructors noticed. You're too hard on her, Ortiz said one evening. She's going to wash out. She's not going to wash out. How do you know? Harper looked at him. Because I didn't. And she's got the same fire I had. Ortiz shook his head, but didn't argue. On day 12, Emma broke. It happened during resistance phase the way it always happened. Exhaustion and cold and hunger and fear wearing down every defense until there was nothing left but raw nerve and exposed wound. Harper was the one who found her. Emma was in the corner of the holding cell, knees pulled to her chest, shaking with sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than her body. Harper sat down next to her. "Tell me," she said. "I can't do this." Emma's voice was barely a whisper. "I thought I could, but I can't. I'm not strong enough. I'm not—" "Stop!" Emma looked up, tears streaming down her face. "You're not weak because you're crying," Harper said. "You're human. Breaking isn't failure. Breaking is the beginning. The beginning of what? Of finding out who you really are." Harper took Emma's hand. "Everyone in this program breaks. Every single one. The ones who become instructors, who become operators, who become leaders, they're not the ones who never fell apart. They're the ones who learned how to put themselves back together." "How do you do that?" Harper thought about Nathan, about the helicopter, about 14 minutes that had changed everything. "You find something to hold on to," she said. "Something that matters more than the pain, something worth coming back for." "I don't have anything like that." "Yes, you do." Harper squeezed her hand. "You told me why you're here. Your father. The promise you made after he died. The people you want to save from what happened to him." She leaned closer. "That's your anchor. That's what will bring you back when everything else falls away." Emma was quiet for a long moment. "My dad used to read me bedtime stories," she whispered. "Every night, even when he was struggling, even when I could tell he was barely holding on, he'd sit by my bed and read until I fell asleep." She wiped her eyes. "The last one he ever read me was about a princess who had to go into a dark forest alone. Everyone told her she couldn't do it, but she went anyway because someone had to. What happened to the princess? She found what she was looking for, but she had to face the dragon first." Emma looked at Harper with something new in her eyes. "I think I'm in the forest right now." "You are. And you're telling me I have to face the dragon. I'm telling you the dragon is just fear wearing a mask." Harper stood up, pulled Emma to her feet. "I'm telling you that you're stronger than anything they can do to you. I'm telling you that your father's sacrifice doesn't have to be the end of your story. It can be the beginning." Emma straightened her spine, wiped the tears from her face, squared her shoulders. "I want to keep going," she said. "Then keep going." Emma made it through. Not just through. She excelled. She broke and she rebuilt herself, and she came out the other side stronger than anyone expected. On the final day of the course, Harper stood before the graduating class. "You've all proven something over the past 3 weeks," she said. "Not to me, not to the instructors, to yourselves. You've proven that you can face the worst parts of who you are and still choose to keep going." She looked at each of them in turn. "Some of you will deploy to combat zones. Some of you will face interrogation by people who don't follow any rules. Some of you will lose friends, lose teammates, lose parts of yourselves that you'll never get back." She paused. "But you will survive. You will come back. You will rebuild." Harper touched the tridents on her chest. "Because that's what we do. Not as operators, not as soldiers. As human beings. We break, and we mend, and we carry our scars as proof that we survived things that should have destroyed us." She dismissed the class. One by one they filed out, shaking her hand, thanking her, promising to remember what she'd taught them. Emma was the last to leave. "Ma'am," Harper turned. "I wanted to thank you," Emma said, "for seeing something in me that I couldn't see myself, for pushing me harder than anyone ever has, for not giving up on me when I was ready to give up on myself. You did the work. I just pointed you in the right direction. It was more than that." Emma hesitated. "My father, I think he would have liked you," I think you're the kind of person who could have helped him if he'd had someone like you in his corner." Harper felt tears threatening. She blinked them back. "I'm recommending you for the instructor program," she said. "You'll start training next month." Emma's eyes widened. "Ma'am, I don't know what to say." "Say you'll do the work. Say you'll bleed for your students the way I bled for you. Say you'll pass on what you learned here to the next generation, and they'll pass it on to the generation after that." "I will." Emma's voice was fierce. "I promise." She saluted, turned, walked out. Harper stood alone in the empty room. She thought about Nathan, about his letter, about the promise she'd made 2 years ago in that helicopter holding his hand while his heart stopped beating. She'd kept the promise. Not perfectly. Not without pain. Not without doubt and fear and moments when she wanted to give up. But she'd kept it. And now there was Emma, and the 160 students before her, and all the students who would come after. Nathan's sacrifice multiplied. His lessons passed on. His belief that people were worth saving, spreading outward like ripples from a stone, dropped in still water. That evening, Harper drove to the small cemetery outside Fort Bragg, where she'd arranged for a memorial stone to be placed. There was no body. Nathan was buried in Arlington with full military honors next to his father and his grandfather and all the other warriors in his family line. But this stone was hers, a place where she could come when she needed to talk to him, when she needed to remember why she kept going. She knelt beside it. "I kept my promise," she said. "I stopped surviving and started living. I'm teaching now, passing on everything you taught me." She touched the cold granite. "There's a girl, Emma. Reminds me of myself at that age. Angry and hungry and desperate to matter. I think you would have loved her." Harper smiled through tears. "I think you would have seen the same thing in her that you saw in me." She was quiet for a moment. "I still miss you. Every day. That's never going to change. But it's different now. The grief is still there, but it's not eating me alive anymore. It's fuel. It's purpose. It's the thing that gets me up every morning and makes me want to be better." She pulled out his letter, unfolded it one more time. "You told me to live fully, completely, with everything I have. You told me to prove you right." She refolded the letter, held it against her heart. "I'm doing it, Nate. I'm finally doing it." She stood up. The sun was setting over Fort Bragg, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Harper looked at it for a long moment. Then she walked back to her truck, drove back to base, and started preparing for tomorrow's class. Because that's what she did now. She taught people how to survive the unsurvivable, how to break and rebuild, how to carry their wounds without letting them become weapons turned inward. She turned loss into legacy, pain into purpose, grief into gift. And somewhere in whatever comes after, Nathan Vega was smiling. Because the small blonde girl who'd held his hand while he died had become something more than a survivor. She'd become a teacher, a leader, a living testament to the truth that some women don't just endure the darkness, they become the light that guides others through it. Harper Cole never forgot the night a man smashed a bottle over her head in a bar outside Camp Pendleton. But that moment no longer defined her. What defined her was every moment after, every student she trained, every operator she saved, every life she touched with the lessons she'd learned from losing someone she loved. The trident behind her ear wasn't just a mark. It was a promise. And she kept that promise every single day for the rest of her life, because that's what warriors do. They fight, they fall, they rise, and they teach others to do the same.